Good evening. When an armed group stops calling itself an army and begins calling itself a business, the people living in its territory may notice remarkably little difference. The same men carry the same rifles down the same jungle roads. The only thing that changes is the paperwork. Tonight, we look at the Clan del Golfo, a Colombian organization that was born out of a war, survived a peace deal, and reinvented itself as one of the most profitable and violent trafficking enterprises in the hemisphere. It is a story about how an institution of violence can outlive the cause it was built for, simply by finding a product to sell. I'm Marty. Let us begin. Story 1. Consider the strange paradox at the heart of this group. An army exists to win a war, and when the war is over, an army is supposed to go home. A corporation exists to make money, and it never wants the work to end. The Clan del Golfo is what you get when the first thing quietly becomes the second. It kept the command structure of a military unit, the ranks, the discipline, the loyalty, and pointed all of it at a single goal that has no ceasefire and no armistice, moving cocaine and collecting cash. The uniform came off, but the organization underneath it stayed intact. That is the trick worth understanding tonight. You do not always defeat an armed group. Sometimes you just change what it charges for. Story 2. To see where these men came from, you have to go back to Colombia's paramilitary years. For decades, right-wing paramilitary blocs fought leftist guerrillas across the countryside, and they funded that fight, in large part, through the drug trade. In the middle of the 2000s, tens of thousands of these paramilitary fighters formally demobilized under a government program. On paper, they laid down their weapons and rejoined civilian life. In practice, a great many of them did not disappear. The commanders were still commanders. The foot soldiers still knew how to hold a road at gunpoint. And the smuggling routes they had spent years protecting were still worth a fortune. Out of that unfinished demobilization, new armed groups congealed, and the Clan del Golfo, also called the Gulf Clan, grew into the largest and most durable of them. Story 3. What happened next was less a revolution than a conversion. The pieces were all lying there, ready to be repurposed. You had armed men organized into disciplined structures. You had smuggling corridors running through jungle and along both coastlines, corridors that had been carrying contraband for years. You had a local population already conditioned to obey whoever carried the guns. The group took those three inheritances, the fighters, the roots, and the fear, and welded them into a trafficking network. Territory that had once been a battlefield became, in effect, a logistics operation. The intimidation that had once served a political war now served a supply chain. Nothing about the machinery had to be invented. It only had to be re-aimed at the export market. Story 4. And the scale of that market is the part that stops you. United States authorities have described the Clan del Golfo as one of the world's largest cocaine distributors, and among the most violent and powerful trafficking organizations operating in Colombia. This is not a neighborhood gang. It is an enterprise with thousands of armed members, a presence across large stretches of the country, and reach into the highest tiers of the international drug economy. Its longtime leader, a former paramilitary fighter known by the alias Otoniel, was among the most wanted men in Colombia before his capture, and he was later extradited to the United States. When your chief executive is a wanted man and your product is a controlled substance, you have built something that functions like a corporation while remaining in every legal sense a criminal army. Story 5. The clearest window into that reach is the export machine, and here Europe tells the tale. Investigations on the far side of the Atlantic have connected suppliers tied to the group to enormous cocaine shipments bound for European ports, cargoes measured not in kilograms but in multiple metric tons. European authorities have spent years chasing the networks that move Colombian cocaine into their harbors, and Colombian trafficking organizations like this one sit near the source of that flow. Think about what that requires: reliable production, dependable transport, corrupt access to shipping, and partners on 2 continents. That is not the work of desperate outlaws. That is a distribution business with an international customer base, doing volume that any legitimate exporter would envy in a product that happens to be poison. Story 6. But step back from the tonnage and the indictments, and remember who actually lives inside this enterprise. In the regions it controls, the Clan del Golfo does not merely traffic. It governs. It taxes farmers and shopkeepers and truckers. It sets the rules and enforces them through fear, through threats, through violence against those who refuse to comply. It has on occasion shut down entire regions by decree, ordering people to stay home and businesses to close, and the people obeyed because the alternative was mortal. Community leaders, human rights defenders, and ordinary residents who cross the group have paid with their lives. This is the human cost that the word trafficking hides. Behind the shipments is a population that did not choose these rulers and cannot vote them out, living under a private government whose only mandate is the gun. Story 7. So here is the verdict. Colombia signed real peace deals and ran real demobilization programs, and those efforts were not fraudulent or worthless. But the Clan del Golfo is the living proof of a hard truth. A peace agreement can dissolve an organization on paper while leaving every one of its assets intact. The guns still fire. The routes still run. The commanders still command, and the customers in Europe and North America and beyond are still very much buying. When all 4 of those things remain employable, the enterprise does not die. It rebrands. The lesson is not that peace is pointless. It is that ending a war on paper is the easy part, and dismantling the machine underneath it is the work that actually matters, the work that in the jungles and river towns of Colombia is still unfinished. I'm Marty, and good night.